system was the principal risk to the Nigerian economy. Today, government finance is the principal risk. It's fiscal policy. I think we've seen the end of the banking crisis, but we need to look very, very closely at government finance and government spending. We have a very sad situation where not only it's not a question of recurrent expenditure rising faster than capital expenditure, but we have an actual decline in capital expenditure while recurrent expenditure has been going up. Remember, this is a development retreat, but look at the slope of the overhead cost. It's been rising faster than every other component of expenditure, and that is the most inflationary component of government spending. This is the whole controversy on overheads. That's what it's about.
That's the governor of the Nigerian Central Bank, Lamido Sanusi. Now, joining us now from Lagos to preview the controversy is Opeyemi Agbaje, CEO of Resource and Trust Company. Opeyemi, the governor is not backing down. Is this thing serious, or should we not be worried at all?
Well, the controversy is serious. The substantive issue is that government spending is rising. Most Nigerians are unhappy with the rate of increase in National Assembly spending, in federal government recurrent spending. Nigerians believe correctly that the National Assembly members earn too much and do too little. So in terms of the substantive controversy, the governor is certainly at one with most Nigerians and certainly with myself as an analyst. It's a point I've made earlier. The rate of increase in the allocations, recurrent, the allowances and all of those to the National Assembly, and indeed the inefficiency of total government spending, whether the capital or the current in the executive as well, are a threat to the government's fiscal position. And they've ensured that in spite of high oil prices and increasing production, reserves are depleting, and that's an issue.
Yeah, is his position under threat?
His position as central bank governor, well, I don't know how this will play out. I would suspect that government will not be happy with him. The legislators certainly are not happy with him, but they recognize that they've come out of this quite unpopular with the Nigerian people. I doubt that in the context of now, in the circumstances, that they will try to remove the governor.
Yeah. Opeyemi, can we just define what we're talking about here? I mean, there's been a little bit of quibbling around what exactly we're referring to and how much money we're talking about here. There's been mention of the fact that they are saying Parliament spends 25% of government's overheads budget. What exactly is that, and how much is it?
Now, as an analyst, I would have to be true to the figures that I have seen. Frankly, on the figures that I have seen, I cannot support the central bank governor's position. What the central bank governor took was the total, in my view, and I stand to be corrected, is the total recurrent budget of the National Assembly, which was 138 billion. He then applied that over the overheads of the federal government, which is a subtotal. He didn't compare, in my view, apples with apples. He was comparing the total recurrent budget of the National Assembly with the overheads, which is a subset of the recurrent budget of the federal government. If you did take the recurrent budgets of the National Assembly, which he took, and applied that on the total recurrent budget of the federal government, you would have 5.17%. And that's why the National Assembly members are outraged. On the other hand, if he was going to apply over the overheads, the figure he needed to apply would be the overheads figure of the National Assembly. Unfortunately, I don't think that figure is available in the public domain. It's subsumed under a total recurrent budget. And so I think the controversy as to the actual figures is something that I will approach more cautiously.
Is there a perception that perhaps the lawmakers are overpaid?
Oh, certainly the lawmakers are overpaid. Now let's distinguish what the lawmakers have been careful or maybe clever. Officially, they earn figures that cannot be described as excessive. Officially, their salaries and allowances for For the members of the House of Representatives are less than 800,000 naira per month. For the senators is just under 1 million naira per month. That cannot be said to be excessive. But what they've done is to create a lot of heads under which they receive constituency allowances, constituency projects are also appropriated on the executive end, and those constituency allowances are huge. By some accounts, the representatives get 27 or 28 million naira per quarter, and the senators 45.5 million naira per quarter, and they want to increase those allowances. And those, I think, by those figures, they would earn more than senators or legislators anywhere else in the world.
Opeyemi, I've got Kobe Grant here from Axis. And Kobe, this is a debate that we often hear across the continent. You do hear, I remember this conversation happening in Kenya where there was mentioned that the lawmakers were voting for themselves huge increases at the expense of the development state. And Sanusi did make the point that you're seeing a decrease in the amount of money invested in, put aside for the investment budget versus your recurrent expenditure, which is your salaries and other stuff.
I mean, two things come to mind for me here. The first is, the central bank governor looks like he's independent from government. So hence, he can stand up and criticize and say, look, I think this thing is working wrong. Regardless if it's right or wrong, and regardless of how right his figures are or how wrong his figures are, he's got the ability to stand up and say and hold government accountable and say, listen, I think things should look differently and should potentially work differently. Now, that's very, very good for from a governance perspective, because I think from a governance perspective, you're able to now sit and look at checks and balances, and you're able to sit and cross off things that need doing and put checks next to things that you think are working fantastically well. And that's good news for government, because government in any developing country can move forward from these things. And I think it's important for things to be held accountable. That's the first thing. I think the second thing, and this is very important, and I think African governments across the continent should potentially heed to this, and that is that pay people what is fair. If you just, I mean, Opeyemi has just spoken about what people receive in a salary and then what they receive over and above that. And if you just look at that whole, if you just have a look at how people are being paid, you know, there's potentially ways and means for people to potentially not be completely truthful about how they earn and what they earn. Rather pay people what they're worth, and suddenly you'll take away the element for all the rest of the stuff to potentially go wrong in the equation.
As a potential foreign investor looking to Nigeria, does this scare you?
Well, not necessarily. It shows, I think the positive for me is there's a governance process. The positive for me is that there's something that'll happen. You know, that there's something being done at the top end level of the country. We know, though, that Nigeria has got issues with corruption. We know that. The question is, how does this filter through the whole system and we're able to get rid of it all?
Right. So, Opeyemi, I mean, you can hear clearly what Kobe is saying here. The great thing about this is that there is a debate going on in Nigeria, and it's great that that debate is taking place. It is healthy, and it augurs well for Nigeria's future. But from inside, do you get a sense that we could perhaps see the reforms that Sanusi has brought about being threatened by this whole episode?
Frankly, it's not likely. Like I said, the National Assembly is probably the most unpopular public institution in Nigeria. Nigerians believe that they don't deserve the return on investment. That's the other dimension of it. As far as Nigerians are concerned, they do nothing. They passed, apart from the Appropriation Acts, which they passed to pay these salaries, they passed few bills. In almost 4 years, they probably have passed less than 10 independent bills. They take the people for granted. There's some arrogance about the National Assembly, and I guess about the whole structure of government, but they are the ones who are more closer to the people, and they're large numbers, and they're more flamboyant, and then therefore the people will complain about them. I think that public opinion has been brewing against the incomes or allowances that are believed to be earned in the National Assembly. Analysts like us have always pointed out this disparity in which we appropriate so much to the current expenditure and less to capital spending that would develop infrastructure, and the whole structure of government at the executive level also, which is very inefficient and wasteful. And I think it's a debate like was pointed out that is good for the country.
Absolutely, it's good for Nigeria, it's good for Africa.